the past many years now, we've seen the number of applications submitted by students go up and up and up and up. And this creates, I studied evolutionary biology in college, and this creates, sort of a runaway selection process, because what happens is program directors get a whole bunch of applications, and they start doing things to make reviewing this big pile of applications in a small amount of time easier, like using filters and stuff like that. And then students hear that residency directors are doing that, and they get nervous, and they submit more applications, which makes the program directors have to filter even harder, and then it's just kind of going out of control. And so a few years ago, Cord put together this task force that very quickly became a committee to kind of talk about, like, what can we do to stop the madness, to stop the insanity, to decrease the runaway selection. And we kicked around a whole lot of different ideas. We've looked at things going on in different specialties and even things going on outside of medicine to try and get some thoughts about all of this. And actually at Cord in New York City, 2020, right at the very start of COVID, we were having this conversation, and we talked about this thing that at the time we called gold stars, and I don't see Adam Kellogg in the room, but that was his thing of, like, what if applicants had like a gold star that they could put on a program and really kind of say that they were truly interested in this specialty or this particular program. And what's really interesting is that actually some other specialties were looking at this, and it came from a paper in, of all places, economics, believe it or not, that was published in 2013. So in the world of economics, when people did postdocs and then tried to get a job in industry, they had the same problem. And the numbers, interestingly enough, are very similar to emergency medicine. There were about 2,500 postdocs applying to about 250 firms, so very close to what we're dealing with residencies. And they had the same problem, right? These postdocs had graduated. They really, really, really wanted a job. They didn't want to not have a job, and so they would apply to all of the programs, right? And all of the programs were like, I just want people who really want to work for me and like kind of fit my company, but they had to go through piles and piles and piles of applicants, and then they would hire these people that didn't really fit, and then people were shuffling around. It was a problem. And so they came up with this idea of preference signaling, where applicants were given a small number of tokens to say, no, yes, I'm applying to 70 places because I want a job, but you're one of the 3 places I'm really and truly, like, really, really interested in. A guy actually from the University of Washington, an ENT guy, picked up on this paper, and in 2019 he put together a computer model and said, what if we had used this in the ENT match last year? And the computer model was super promising, and it was so promising that actually in the 2020 match, whoops, I didn't win one early, they put together their own version of preference signaling. They did it completely outside of ERAS and put this together. And emergency medicine was actually invited to participate in that trial, and we decided not to because we had just coming off the disaster that was the video interviews. And when we approached Cord, we were like, hey, we want to try this thing. They're like, no, absolutely not. So we missed out on that. But their data from the 2020 match was so promising that last year, urology did their own version of this in their match, and then as part of the supplemental match in ERAS, dermatology, internal medicine, and general surgery used this. And all of the preliminary data from this is fantastic. Part of the API, we put together this opinion piece that was kind of throughout last fall and into the spring. So before this year's match numbers came out, we said, listen, we think this is a great idea. We really, really, really think that we should do this. That's the QR that links you directly to the paper. But just to kind of summarize it, there were so many advantages to doing this and really almost no disadvantages. So the biggest one is it's totally unbiased. This does not give an advantage to anyone, right? Any other of the systems that we were looking at, if we said, listen, we want you to write a 3-page statement detailing all the reasons why you love our program, right? Somebody with a lot of time can write many, many more of those statements than somebody who's working an extra job or has kids or for whatever reason doesn't have as much time, right? Or even interviews, right? If you have more money to travel to more places, you can interview at more places than somebody who doesn't have that. So that's one of the things we loved about this the most. There's no cost to anybody. It really doesn't cost anything to the programs or the applicants, which we loved. And it's really pretty simple, right? It's just, pick a few programs, put a gold star on them, and you're good. What was most interesting to us, though, was the data from the ENT stuff showed that applicants from the lowest quartile, the least competitive applicants, actually got the biggest advantages from this program. Programs were much more willing to look at those applicants who signaled that they were interested in their program. And in the end, those applicants actually got more benefits from this than the higher tier applicants. So we were like, that's phenomenal. And then the other piece of it, and we kind of have this problem in emergency medicine, the last talk sort of alluded to this, if you were a fantastic applicant who is looking at sort of a mid-tier or even a lower tier program, right? A lot of times those programs might say, you're not from Florida, why are you applying to my program? Or you're just kind of out of our league. And when you send a signal like that, it says, no, really, I actually am genuinely interested in your program. You're not just like a safety school at the very bottom of my list. Some advantages just to us on the program side, this decreases way down on the number of emails and communications that we get from applicants that are like, no, really, I'm really, really interested in your program. Which again, if you kind of go back to it, if you got the time and effort, you could send that same email to every single program you apply to, right? So it's not helpful, but we were getting a lot of it. It will hopefully increase the congestion around interviews, right? Again, people are just applying to lots and lots of places because they want to match, not necessarily because they're interested in my program. And so we overbook our interviews. I know a lot of other programs do this as well because people cancel on us, right? They're not actually interested in my program, and when they get an invitation from a program that they're more interested in, they cancel. And now I got to scramble to find an applicant to fill the spot. And then, at the end, hopefully, long term, we hope that this just decreases the number of applications submitted and kind of gets back to the bottom of that whole root of this problem, right, of just the over-application phenomenon in general. So we presented this stuff all over the place. We got input from lots and lots of people. We got buy-in from the program directors, from the students, from the advisors, from basically everyone we could think of. I don't know if there's any logos that we're missing on there, but everybody loved it. So we are trying it this year, and now let's talk about this works. So this is going to be a part of what's called the supplemental application to ERAS. And the way that this works is when you start looking at a program and put them on your list, essentially, that is, will be using the supplemental application, you're going to get notified about that. The supplemental application actually will have 3 parts, okay? So one of the parts is basically kind of an expanded CV. You're allowed to pick some of your experiences and talk more about those things. Another part is you can have a geographic preference. Don't write any of this down yet. I see you. Don't do it. And kind of say, like, I'd like to be in this particular region. And then the third part is preference signaling. Emergency medicine decided those first 2 things are not going to help us. We're not going to do this at all. Okay? We're only going to use preference signaling. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I can get into all that. But just know that we're not using these things. Now, as a very quick aside, if you are applying in another specialty besides emergency medicine, you still need to fill that other stuff out. Okay? But emergency medicine, you're only going to see the preference signaling part of things. Okay? But like if you're applying like anesthesia plus emergency medicine, do the whole thing. Okay? And we're trying to make sure that ERAS makes that really, really, really clear because we don't want thousands of EM-only people like, why did I fill all this other crap out? So, on the program side of things, by June 1st, we need to let ERAS know whether or not we're participating in the supplemental application. So we will submit a thing. We have to agree to the program code of conduct, and I think the most important one is right here. Programs will not ask interviewees where they have signaled. Okay, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But basically, programs are going to say, this is sort of confidential information that we're going to keep within our own program for ourselves. And most importantly, that signals really should only be used to decide who do you want to invite for an interview. On the applicant side of things, this is going to open up like the last talk talked about on August the 1st, and it will close on September the 16th. And again, like I said, once you start looking at a program that has said, we want to use the supplemental application, you'll get a notification from ERAS saying, hey, you've signaled some interest in a program that is using the supplemental application. Know that it's updated for you. Whoops. After that, until you've actually completed the supplemental application, they will email you once a week to just kind of remind you, hey, this program is using the supplemental app. We see you haven't finished that. Please finish that. Which I think is fantastic that they're sending you lots of reminders. I'm sure that will get annoying, but I think it's a good idea. And then you'll actually get a confirmation email once you've finished it and fully submitted your supplemental application. So the way that this will work is you're going to get 5 signals or 5 tokens. Every applicant will get 5. No one will get more than 5. No one will get less than 5. Okay? This is one of the questions that the people at my table were asking is, do I need to submit my home program or do I need to submit one to a program where I did an away rotation? And the answer to that is no. Okay, and we'll talk about why that is in just a minute. But so you do not need to use these at places where you're basically guaranteed an interview because you're already guaranteed an interview. So I've already heard lots of rumors from my own students and even from chatting people up at this particular conference. There's lots of stuff going around. So what are some rumors you guys have heard about this so far? No one has heard anything? Okay, that's fine. So one of them, people are like, I heard it guarantees me an interview. No. I heard it guarantees me that someone will look at my application. No. Okay? All it is you are signaling your preference in this program.
I was just going to say that I don't know that it's always true that an away rotation grants an interview to
That is true. That is true. And this is something we've wrestled with a little bit. But for right now, we're saying you don't need to submit a token to if you did an away rotation. As a home program with a whole lot of EM interested students, we don't always invite all of our home students for an interview. And again, it was a big conversation. Sure. But right now, we're telling people, don't use them at your home program. Don't use them at your away rotation. So another one that I've heard is, what if I don't signal a program? I heard they're never going to look at anything. Also not true, okay? And again, we'll talk about why that is in just a second. But any other rumors that you guys have heard so far? Okay, yeah, that one is actually kind of sort of true, and again, I'll talk about why that is in just a second. All right, so the way that I like to think about this is a boost to your application, okay? And like she just said, all right, this is data from 2019 from ENT, so this is the number of programs that got a certain amount of signals. And if you'll notice, most of the programs only got a few signals. The median from this data, I think, was 16, and the average was 18, if I remember correctly. But you can see, right, a whole lot of programs didn't get very many signals, and then there were a handful of programs that got a ridiculous number of signals. The average ENT applicant applies to 70 programs. There were 600 applicants divided over, I forget how many programs, right? But so you can imagine, if you send a signal to this program that got one signal, right, that's going to have a whole lot of power, right? Because that program, you're like one of 3 people that said, you're at the top of my list. Okay, great, let's bring you in, right? Whereas if you send a signal to this guy over here that got 70 signals, maybe they interview 70 applicants, I have no idea, right? But that signal's like, okay, here, I'm going to throw you in the giant pile of people that signaled. So like you just said, if you know that there's a program that gets thousands of applications and they're all, everybody's get a signal in that program, yeah, that's probably a waste of a signal, okay? And so, in talking to my students, every single one, I had 54 students going to emergency medicine last year, they all want to go to Denver, every last one of them. And I'm like, listen, how many spots is Denver? They don't have 54 spots at Denver, right? So you can't all go to Denver. And so if all of them signal Denver, like, yeah, that's probably not the best use of their signal, okay? So. Oh, well, I hate to tell you, but not all of my students want to go to Ohio State. But
Doug, can I interject?
Actually, none of my students want to go to Ohio State. So I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Gannon.
I think the counterpoint is we don't know what programs are going to get a ton of signals because it's the first year, and you don't know what those programs are looking for. So you might say, man, I'm not going to waste a signal on Ohio State. But you don't know that Ohio State isn't looking for you, and when they see your signal, they will pluck you out of that 70, 100, whatever, how many they got. So I think this is where the tension lies in terms of advising students, but also coming from a program standpoint. And I don't know that we have great answers, but Doug does.
I have no answers. So I'm actually going to skip way ahead because I put all these data slides in here, and I just need to find this one particular slide because I think that's a really insightful thing that you said. So this is stuff from ENT. And so what they did here, right, is they looked at who got interview offers if you gave a signal. That's this blue bar. And then they asked the applicants, they said, listen, tell us the program that, if you had gotten 6 signals, where would you have put that 6th signal, okay? And that's actually this orange bar. So they called that the closest non-signal program. So when you looked at the interview rate for, if you signaled versus the place that you didn't signal, look what a humongous difference this makes. So I absolutely agree. If you're interested in a program, signal the program. Tell them that you're interested in them, right? Because it's gonna make a difference, okay? Even if it's a place that got 1,000 signals, right? If you don't signal them, that means you're 1,001 on their list of applications to look at. Right? Whereas if you do signal them, you're going to be at least somewhere above that. Hopefully 998 if you're Nick. I don't know, maybe 9. Sorry. Anyway, right? Because if they're getting lots of signals and you don't signal them, you basically have just taken yourself out of the running at that particular program. But again, we don't even know. We have no idea. Maybe Denver's going to get 10 signals because everybody's like, oh, Denver's going to get it. Ohio State's going to get all the signals. So I'm not going to bother applying, and then they don't get any. We don't know. It's a big shrug emoji right now. So what this really means is when you're sitting down to do all this stuff, you're going to have to spend some time really kind of thinking about what are the programs that I am most interested in. Why am I interested in this program? You're going to have to actually do some research on these programs, talk to your advisor, figure out where you are in terms of competitiveness and your interests and what sort of program is going to be a good fit for you and what sort of programs might not be a good fit for you. I know when I first sit down with students, it's often almost universally it's a geographic thing. And I get that, I totally understand that, but you got to go a couple steps beyond that. And so I tell them, think about things like, what kind of a learner are you? Are you like a really hands-on, like you like to get in there and get dirty right away, or you like to kind of step back and watch people do things, right? Because there are definitely programs that are one way or programs that are the other way. Or there are hospitals like UW where we kind of have very selected training sites. We have Harborview, which is our main trauma center, and UW, which is our very academic center, and we have a children's ED, and whereas like where I trained at VCU, all of those things were all in one place, and so are you the kind of person who learns well with like focused experiences that are a little bit more targeted, or are you the sort of person that's just, squirrel? Because we're all different learners, and there's all kinds of different programs that are good for all kinds of different learners. So talk with your advisors, think about what you're really looking for in a program, think about what kind of program is going to be good for you, and then use your signals appropriately. In terms of advice, we are putting together a big advising guide. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the CORD page that has all of the different advising guides. It's also linked to EMRA and probably on RAMS. It's in like 6 different places. But the CORD main website has a preference signaling homepage, and this guide will live with all of the different guides. It's not quite ready yet, but it'll be up very, very soon. And then there's going to be some webinars on this. We got one coming up very, very shortly with the CORD Connects. It's going to have Alexis Pelletier, Buie, and Elizabeth Worley talking about all this stuff as well. The slides may look awfully familiar. That's okay. RAMS is going to have a session on this. EMRA is going to have a session on this. So lots and lots and lots of information. Okay, and probably things as we kind of move through the season, things are going to evolve a little bit over time. I don't know how much more there's going to be to learn about this, but that's what we know right now. So, what questions do you guys have? You. So that's an interesting question, and that gets into the mechanics of how ERAS works. So your program coordinator can actually hide certain data from you, and so that's one of the things like we've talked about. We don't want the people who are reviewing our files to know whether or not that the person was signaled, and so we're going to take that data out once we've kind of gone through the initial triage process. But how any individual program deals with that, that's going to be up to each program. Right, and I totally agree, right? If we get 5 signals versus 500 signals, like our response is going to be very different. So and that's not something that you really need to worry about. Again, I would just use your signals where you think your signals are going to work best for you.
Are there any top-down recommendations for like couples matching applicants? Like for example, with very desirable programs that are in a city with only one hospital, it may not be as strategic if there's like preference signaling in both WTs to give that signal. Do those programs say like we understand the couples matching and might not be able to signal with them?
I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, but I would say, if there's a city that works for both of you guys and that's a desirable thing, then I would use your signals there.
Yeah, I'm just saying like Boston, New York, LA have multiple programs, whereas hospitals with, or cities with single hospitals, it might be more of a gamble to put a signal on them. And do they understand that like people who are couples matching can really
They won't necessarily understand that. We're not at that level. So I think the decision is like if you guys have one city like that, that you're like, okay, but these are where we're going to concentrate. There's this one place that we such a dream. Like, let's give up one of our signals
open all applications.
Yeah. Yeah, and right. Like I said before, the signal is not. It doesn't necessarily change whether or not your application is going to be open. To your point, this is something we were talking about at our table at lunch. Is ERAS opens up, and we have probably a week to maybe 2 weeks before we got to get our applications out so that we can start our interview season. And I know everybody's in that same boat, right? We're not playing 5-dimensional chess. We have a week and a half to look through 1,000 applications. And so it really is like, what's the quickest way I can find people that are really and truly interested in my program, and seeing a signal, a gold star, or whatever you want to call it, a bachelorette rose, that says this person's really interested. So, I can guarantee you that however any of our programs decide to do this, those with the signal are going to be at the top of the list to look through, right? I think everybody's going to start there.
Hypothetically, if I was a student applying and I'm in the lower tier of my class, if I have grades or I have a lower board score or something like that, should I be dividing up my signals based on reach programs, safety programs, and what advice do you have on that?
So nobody really knows, and even with the data from ENT, and there has been lots of talk about like what's the most strategic use of your signals, and so there. I don't know if you guys know the sheriff of sodium. I think his outlook on this is the best, and that's again, this is a boost, right? So if you have no chance of getting an interview somewhere, like let's suppose that you're an IMG and you're applying to my hospital, and you don't have the one kind of visa that my hospital will approve. It doesn't matter what you do. You could be the best applicant in the world. You're not going to get invited because we can't sponsor your visa, and there's nothing I can do about that. So you could give me all 5 of your signals. You don't send more than one signal to the program. But like it doesn't matter what you do. I can't help you, and so that's a waste of a signal, right? And this goes back to what we were talking about with your home program, right? Where like you're pretty much guaranteed an interview. That's a waste. If you have a 98% chance of getting an interview somewhere, and then you use this boost, like. It's not like you're going to get a 104% chance of getting an interview, right? And so you want to think about places where it's like you have a reasonable chance of getting an interview, but really and truly you're interested in that program and you really, really, really want to go there. That's where you need to use these signals, okay? So I think, again, trying to play that 5-dimensional chess of like, well, my chances here are kind of low, but then like don't get into that. Think about where you want to go and then do that. And there actually there's some data, again, sorry, I apologize because I got to scroll through a million slides, of who used this stuff where, right? And so this is from this past year's match. This is a quick survey, and it's only about 1/3 of people who responded to this, so take that already with a big grain of salt, right? And so a lot of applicants said, I'm only going to use these for my safety programs. I'm only going to use them for reach programs, right? But you look, the bulk of people, where did I use them? Where I was truly interested in. And what do their advisors tell you? Use them where you're truly interested in, okay? And the data from ENT looks exactly the same. So really, 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 like, that's the whole point of this, is it's a way of saying, like, pick me. I'm really super interested in your program. I want to be at Ohio State. I don't know why, but I want to be at Ohio State. So,
name, image, and likeness.
Columbus, really? Anyway. So really, really, don't, again, playing 5-dimensional chess. I get it. If you want to, a lot of people have said maybe do like 3 of your most favorite programs and a bit of a reach program and a favorite, not a reach program. I got a hand back there. Correct. Right, because that's one of the things that we have really talked about, because some people have said that, like, well, man, if I had 2 equally equivalent applicants and I was going to put them on the rank list, of course I'd pick the one that signaled. I disagree with that, because the thing is, you guys' preferences change as you interview, right? You go, and there's this program that, absolute top of your list, and you go there and you're like, Ohio State was not the program for me. Right? And then you come to University of Washington and you're like, I didn't really think UW was going to be that great, but man, like this is home. This is where I belong. Right? And that happens, and we understand that happens, and that's totally okay that happens. And so how you felt about things in August when you filled this out before you had interviewed at a single program is going to be very different than how you feel about things in January or February when you're making your rank list.
Question related to hers. What do you think the opt-out rate will be, and what will the reasons be for people who don't?
Data.
We should have just covered the slides.
Yeah, no, I know, really. The opt-out rate was not that. It was approximately 85%. Yeah, so a lot of people opted into this.
Okay.
And the data for ENT is in the 90s. I mean, really, there's no reason not to do this, right? There's no harm from this. Other programs won't know that you didn't signal them, or why you didn't signal them, or where your signals went, or whatever, right? So there's really, there is literally no downside to being a part of this program. So I don't know why you wouldn't do it. But I'm sure people, they're paranoid, whatever. It causes brain cancer. I don't, Microsoft is tracking you through microchip. I don't know. Whatever your reasons are, if you don't want to participate, no pressure. Right? But I feel like it's a thing that can give you a leg up at the programs where you use it. And I don't know why you would pass that opportunity up. But I'm sure some people will have their reasons. All right, I have no idea how much time we have, but more questions.
Maybe a couple more.
We're actually doing pretty good.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I try to keep this short because I knew there'd be lots of questions.
Tomorrow morning at 9:30.
There's no other questions?
If you did an away rotation and you didn't give them a gold star like this, would that be seen as a red flag?
No, so that's one of the things that we already talked about, right? Is that at most away rotations, they offer interviews to most of their people. Again, this is something we talked about with my tables. That's honestly a conversation you should have as you're setting up an away rotation is, do you offer interviews to all of the people who rotate here? And then the secondary question is, some places actually do the interview while you're physically there. Other places wait and have you come back. And who knows about with virtual interviews this year and all that stuff. But anyway, so if you know you're already getting an interview, no, don't use their signal there.
But even more explicit than that, the advising is, even if you don't know you're getting an interview, don't.
Right.
You've already preference signaled them by choosing them as your one away rotation.
Correct.
Or two away rotations, so it's redundant.
Correct. Right. And so that was actually one of the many debates that we had about this. Is that going to create a huge market for people to do tons of away rotations? Because then that's more programs, right, where they have kind of a foot in the door in terms of an interview where they don't have to use a signal. And again, we will come back to the very consistent advice. One home, one away. You should have 2 ESLOs. That's it. Other than certain special circumstances. But yeah. Oh, back in the back.
Would that also apply to subspecialty rotations that you do for 2 weeks or something?
No. So those are the ultrasound, the tox, the EMS, all that kind of stuff. You can certainly use a signal at those. So I would say the ones where you did an ESLO level rotation, month-long acting internship, right? Because those have more or less clinical experience. Some of those rotations, they give you a handful of shifts in the ED. Some of them, you never even see the ED because you're over in the toxicology building. And so we can't really say whether or not. But for the most part, for those subspecialty rotations, you can use a signal for those.
Would you say that, let's say you're trying to change areas of the country, like you're in the southeast and you want to go to Texas or Midwest or something, do you think it would be beneficial to use signals if you are, not wanting to stay in the same place? I don't know if I missed that.
Yep. So that's sort of that, this applicant is out of my league. Why are they applying to my program? That question kind of goes away if you use one of your 5 signals out of the 30 plus programs that you apply to, right? I already know I'm hopefully at this moment in time, I'm in the top 5 of your rank list right now, right? So that it kind of takes away that pressure, that need to communicate to programs and say, no, really, I'm interested. I know I'm from Washington State, but I really do want to come to Florida. And I thought I saw another hand up a second ago somewhere. No?
So once again, just to reiterate, these preference signals are meant to influence just interview invites.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Do you think that will hold true?
I hope so. I would love to have faith in my fellow program directors, even if they are from Ohio State. And so I think for the most part it will. I'm sure that there will be some exceptions here and there just because I know how people write their SLOs and use the breakdowns. And we all know there's a handful of people that the rules don't apply to them, and that's just the way it is. So, but I think for the most part, again, just knowing, right, when you go on interviews, it changes what you're looking for in a program. And that's one of my biggest pieces of advice to my students is you don't know what you want in a program until you've walked away from an interview going, that is not it. I do not want to go there, right? And as soon as you have that really kind of cements, what are you actually looking for in a program? And so I know, your preferences changed over that 6 to 8 month period. Absolutely they do. And so, again, how you felt in August is going to be very different, or maybe very different from how you feel in January or February, and that's okay.
We have so much more information. And once you get into that interview, I have the opportunity to ask you, why Dallas, right? And you have the opportunity to tell me it. And it's like, I've heard the strip clubs there are better than okay.
They're not as good as Columbus.
That's like the whole, like, we want to move to the country, we want to do sort of things. Yeah, maybe that's where the competition there. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's where it's like you kind of, now you have that opportunity to give me a reason why you thought my program was interesting and things like that. And that's what sort of was missing before. And that's where all those emails were coming from. Like, but I really, like, I promise I've been there and it's good and I like that. And, but that's kind of what we're hoping to do. But again, when you have that interview, and we should take that more seriously. Because again, yeah, you preference signal, but then it turns out that you were preferencing signaling based out of like what you thought was my program was like, or again, like, because the strip clubs are the best there. And well, I think I'm concerned that's what they're going to spend their time doing, and actually our program we emphasize different things.
Or maybe the strip clubs weren't as good as you thought they were going to be, right? Like that happens. It's okay. Right, you know, because you guys are making a lot of these initial decisions based on.
Wrap this up.
You got to get to the strip. Oh, sorry. No. It's been out of hand.
There's another Michigan
Yeah,
guy on
yeah.
the agenda.
But
Very
you
sure
know,
to get thrown out.
what I'm trying to say, right, is you guys are making those initial decisions based on looking at websites, you know, maybe conversations with your advisor who's like, oh, I went to Ohio State, it was a fine program, you know, or like stuff you're reading on Reddit, right? And it's so very different to then, you know, have a conversation with somebody 20, 30 minutes talking about their program, right? And, you know, you guys have all, I'm sure, had the experience where you meet somebody and you're like, oh my God, I'm so fired up about this person. I would love to work with this person. Like, I remember that distinctly. The place that ended up first on my rank list, I remember when I met that program director, I'm like, I want to work for that guy. That guy's amazing. He's going to be awesome. And he was. And I was so glad that I matched there. And that was a place that was really, you know, not even almost not on my radar. It was just kind of like, I'm in the vicinity. There's a program there. I'll apply. So, you know, again, it really, things change as you have these conversations and you learn more about programs or you meet people or you click with someone.
Yeah, I was going to say, you may not have even finished all like your rotations, your away rotation by then. And I know for me, I was moving to Wisconsin, like a geographic destination, and then did like county versus other places and fell in love with county, and I never left Florida. And right, and so like what you're actually looking for may change drastically, and we all understand that. So I don't, you know, using your preference signal that you gave us in August isn't going to make a lot of sense. So I don't think that that like. That should really factor in as much. You're going to be able to change your mind and pick what you want. It's most important what happens on interview day, and by interview day, knowing what you're looking for and having those experiences and conversations.
All right.
Oh, well, one last question.
Okay.
Being a non-US IMG, so I'm Canadian, okay, how do I not waste my signals? Because a lot of programs will say they are IMG friendly, but in reality they are not.
Yeah, so EMRA match with the filters, very helpful there. And then I think the second piece of advice most people would give you is actually look at their class list of where do these people go to school? Do they really and truly match IMGs, right? Because they have some listed and their bios say, you know, I'm from Canada or I'm from the Bahamas or I'm from wherever. Or, you know, do they say they match IMGs, but oddly enough, in the 4 years of residence that are there, there's not a single IMG in the class. So, and then, you know, definitely, like, obviously in Canada you don't have the visa issues, but, you know, stuff like that also plays a huge part. Like, there's hospital policies about some of that stuff that the program has no control over, so.
Great. Let's give Doug a round of applause.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.